The Space Odyssey of Major Thompson. The crackle of static hummed in Major Thompson's ears as he floated weightlessly in the capsule. The faint beeping of the ship's navigation systems created a rhythmic backdrop, a metronome for his drifting thoughts. The blue planet below, Earth, glowed like a sapphire suspended in the void. But the comfort of its distant beauty was little solace now. He was alone. "Ground control to Major Thompson, do you copy?" The voice broke through the static, sharp yet tinged with a weariness that mirrored his own. It was Harris, his link to humanity, the voice that anchored him to reality. "I copy ground control," Thompson responded, his voice calm, practiced, almost detached. "Everything stable, systems operational, fuel reserves at projected levels, over." "Good to hear, Major," Harris replied, the sound of papers shuffling faintly audible in the background. "And how are you holding up?" The question was less technical, more human. Thompson hesitated, glancing at the photo taped to the console. A smiling woman holding a laughing child, his wife and son. "I'm fine, Harris, just taking it all in." And he was. The sheer silence of space, the vastness of the cosmos. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. He had trained for this, studied every contingency, but nothing could prepare a person for the visceral weight of infinity pressing against their psyche. He tried to focus on the mission, reminding himself of the purpose that had brought him here. The vessel, Odyssey 1, was humanity's first attempt at prolonged space travel beyond the orbit of the moon. Thompson had been chosen not only for his skills but for his ability to remain calm under pressure, a quality that seemed both a blessing and a curse now. Hours turned into days, the routine of checks and reports providing structure in the absence of time. Outside, stars burned cold and distant, their light eternal yet unreachable. Thompson began to talk more to Harris, their conversations growing less formal as the days stretched on. "Tell me, Harris," Thompson asked during one quiet transmission, "what's it like down there? I imagine the newspapers are having a field day with this mission." "Oh, you wouldn't believe it, Major," Harris replied, chuckling. "You're a celebrity. Major Thompson, the Star Voyager. They've even written songs about you." Thompson smiled faintly. "Songs, huh? Never imagined I'd inspire those." "Yeah, it's odd though. The way they talk about you, it's like you're already a legend. Like you've transcended or something." "Transcended?" Thompson's smile faded as he looked out at the black void. That's one way to put it. The conversations with Harris became his lifeline, the only tether to the world he had left behind. But even that tether began to fray. Static grew heavier with each passing day, their exchanges punctuated by garbled words and bursts of silence. "Ground control to Major Thompson, do you copy?" Harris's voice, faint and distorted, struggled to reach him one day. "I copy ground control," Thompson said, leaning closer to the console. "Signal's weak, but I hear you. Over. Updates, guidance, recalib." The words dissolved into a wash of static, then silence. "Ground control, come again." "I didn't catch that." "Over." Thompson's voice wavered, a crack forming in his calm exterior. No response. "Ground control, this is Major Thompson. Do you copy?" "Over." His voice grew louder, more desperate. The silence was deafening. Days passed, then weeks. Thompson clung to the hope that the connection would return, that Harris would break through the static with some reassurance. But as the silence stretched on, hope gave way to acceptance. He was alone now, truly alone. His routine became a hollow ritual. He performed system checks, logged his observations, spoke aloud as if Harris were still listening. The isolation gnawed at him, a constant presence that he could neither escape nor ignore. Memories of his family became a double-edged sword, comforting yet painful, a reminder of what he might never see again. Time lost meaning. The endless expanse of space became his world, a realm without boundaries or horizons. He spoke to the ship, to himself, to the stars. He dreamed of Earth, of green fields and blue skies, of voices and laughter. But each time he awoke, the cold, unyielding void greeted him. One day, something changed. Thompson awoke from a restless sleep, his breath fogging the small window of his helmet. He blinked, disoriented, and looked out into the void. At first, he thought it was a trick of his mind, a mirage born of loneliness and longing. But as he focused, he saw it, a faint, glowing object in the distance. It was round, smooth, and luminous, its surface shimmering with colors that seemed to shift and dance like liquid light. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, a beacon in the darkness. Thompson's heart raced, a mixture of awe and disbelief flooding his senses. Was it a planet? A star? A ship? He didn't know, but the sight of it filled him with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in months, maybe years. He checked the ship's instruments, but they offered no answers. The object wasn't on any known charts, its distance and size impossible to calculate. It was an enigma, a mystery that defied explanation. "I see it," he whispered to himself, his voice trembling. "I see something." The urge to move toward it was overwhelming, a pull he couldn't resist. He adjusted the ship's trajectory, the thrusters firing in short bursts as he guided Odyssey one toward the glowing sphere. The ship groaned in protest, its aging systems strained by the maneuver, but Thompson pressed on. As he drew closer, the object grew larger, its details becoming clearer. It was breathtaking, a world of impossible beauty, its surface shimmering like opal, its atmosphere glowing with an otherworldly light. He felt a surge of hope, a belief that this might be it. Another world, another chance. "Is this home?" he murmured, his voice barely audible. The question hung in the air, unanswered. The ship's systems beeped urgently, warning of dwindling fuel and failing power, but Thompson ignored them. His eyes were fixed on the glowing sphere, his mind consumed by the need to reach it, to understand it. As he drew closer, the ship shuddered, the strain of the journey pushing it to its limits. Thompson braced himself, his hands gripping the controls, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and exhilaration. And then, just as the object loomed large in his view, the ship's power flickered. The lights dimmed, the instruments went dark, and the hum of the engines faded into silence. Thompson floated in the capsule, bathed in the glow of the mysterious sphere. He reached out, as if he could touch it, as if he could bridge the infinite distance between them. The silence returned, but this time it was different. It wasn't the silence of emptiness, but of something vast and unknown, something waiting to be discovered. Thompson smiled, a faint glimmer of hope lighting his weary eyes. For the first time in years, he felt alive. The ship drifted closer, the glowing sphere filling the window, its beauty overwhelming. And then, just as emotion began to well up in his eyes, he caught sight of something in the distance that left him frozen for several minutes.
I walked the line. The sun was sinking low over the Texas plains, casting long golden shadows across the fields. The cicadas were humming their evening song, and the scent of wildflowers filled the warm air. I adjusted my hat, feeling the sweat trickle down my neck, but it wasn't the heat that had me uneasy. It was life itself. My name's Hans, and in 1963, I was just another man trying to find his footing in a world that never quit moving. I'd grown up on my family's ranch outside of Waco, where the days were long and the lessons came hard. My daddy was a stern man, but he always said, "A good life is just a series of right choices, one after the other. The hard part is sticking to that path." I never thought much of it when I was a kid. I figured I'd work the ranch, marry a local girl, and pass the same wisdom down to my son someday. But life, as I'd learned, had a way of throwing curveballs. It started with Mary Lou. She was the preacher's daughter, with a voice as sweet as summer rain and eyes that could light up the darkest night. We met at a church social, and before long we were inseparable. I loved her fiercely, and for a while, loving her made me believe I could keep my balance on that good line my daddy always talked about. But temptation has a way of creeping up on you like a rattlesnake in the brush. I was young, and when I wasn't working the ranch, I'd take off with friends to the honky-tonk on the outskirts of town. It was a place where the beer flowed freely and the jukebox played until the sun came up. The crowd there didn't care much for rules or right paths. They just lived fast and free. One night I had too many drinks, and before I knew it, I was caught up in a brawl over something I can't even remember. All I knew was the taste of blood in my mouth and the sting of regret when the sheriff hauled me out in cuffs. Mary Lou stood on the porch when I got home, her face pale as moonlight. "Hans," she said softly, "you promised me you'd walk the line." I didn't have an answer. My silence was enough to break her heart. After that night, things changed. Mary Lou didn't leave me, but she pulled away like she was waiting to see if I'd crumble or redeem myself. I didn't know which would happen first. I spent the next few months working the ranch like a man possessed. The sun burned my skin, the dust clogged my lungs, but I didn't care. Every morning I told myself, "Today you'll do better. Today you'll walk that line." It wasn't easy. The honky-tonk still called my name, and some nights I'd drive out there, park my truck in the lot, and just sit. I could hear the music through the walls, the laughter of old friends, but I never went in. Instead, I'd light a cigarette, take a few drags, and think about Mary Lou, about my daddy's words, about the man I wanted to be. One night, as I was driving back from another long shift on the ranch, I saw her car pulled over on the side of the road. The hood was up, steam rising into the cool night air. I stopped and got out. "Need a hand?" I asked. She smiled, that same sweet smile I'd fallen in love with. "You sure you're not too busy walking the line to help a girl out?" I laughed, but it wasn't the laugh of a man hiding his shame anymore. It was the laugh of a man who knew he was on the right path, or at least trying his damned hardest to stay there. We fixed her car that night, and on the drive back to town, Mary Lou reached over and took my hand. "I see you trying, Hans," she said. "That's all I ever wanted." And in that moment, I realized something. Walking the line isn't about being perfect. It's about making the choice every day to do better, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Life will always test you, tempt you, and push you toward the edge, but as long as you keep putting one foot in front of the other, you're still walking. I squeezed her hand and nodded. "I'll keep walking," I promised. Because some lines are worth walking, no matter how many times you stumble along the way.
There was no moment of birth, no mother to hold me, no father to guide me. I have simply been, always lurking in the fringes of existence, a shadow that slithers through time, an insatiable hunger clothed in darkness. I have had many names. The Arabs called me Ghoul, the devourer of the lost, lurking in the endless dunes where travelers vanished without a trace. The Greeks whispered of empusas, demon spirits with burning eyes, who took the form of beautiful women to lure men to their doom. The Romans feared the larvae, restless phantoms that gnawed at the souls of the living. In Europe, they spoke in hushed tones of nachtserers, night feeders who drained life with each breath, leaving their victims as hollow husks. In the frozen lands of the Norse, they called me Draugr, the revenant that rose from its grave, stalking the night with an unrelenting hunger. The Slavs knew me as the Upir, creeping through the villages before the first light of dawn, my presence marked by the eerie stillness of the air. In Africa, the Ashanti spoke of Adzes, spirits that slipped through the cracks of the world, feeding on the living without ever being seen. The Japanese feared the Gaki, spirits of insatiable hunger, cursed to wander in eternal famine. But I am not bound by these names, nor by the places where they are spoken. I have worn many faces, whispered through countless myths, and watched as humanity attempted to name what they could never truly understand. I am eternal, and I hunger. I was there when the first fires flickered in the darkness, when trembling hands carved figures into stone, praying to the unknown. In the painted caves of Lascaux, I watched as men shaped visions of beasts they would never tame. Their whispers filled the air, thick with fear of things unseen. I crept through the shadows of Göbekli Tepe, where the first temples rose from the earth, where offerings were made to gods long forgotten. The scent of blood, of bone turned to dust, lingered in the soil. I moved among the Sumerians, through the towering ziggurats of Ur, where priests murmured incantations to the heavens, unaware of what stirred beneath them. I listened in the grand halls of Akkad, where empires were built with words and swords, only to crumble into silence. When the rivers of Mesopotamia ran red with conquest, when the first kings claimed divinity and fell beneath the weight of their hubris, I was there, watching, waiting. I walked unseen through the Indus Valley, where cities rose in perfect symmetry, where the streets were lined with the echoes of lives lost to time. I moved through Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, where the air grew thick with the weight of vanished civilizations, their names all but erased. In China, I stood beneath the yellow skies of the Shang dynasty, where ancestors were honored with fire and bone, where the oracle bones cracked beneath the heat, whispering secrets to those who could read them. I slithered through the dunes of Egypt, past the great tombs built to defy decay. The necropolis of Giza was my domain, where the forgotten rested in the silence of eternity. Their bodies lay undisturbed in the dark, time slowly reclaiming them. The air was thick with the scent of age, with whispers of things that thrived where the living dared not tread. And the maggots, the maggots. They were patient, diligent in their work, weaving the tapestry of decay in the unseen corners of the world. When the Greeks sailed across the Mediterranean, their warriors speaking of gods and glory, I followed. I walked among the dead in Marathon, lingered over the fallen at Thermopylae. The iron taste of war clung to the air, thick as the blood that seeped into the soil. I crept through their camps at night, silent and patient, watching those whose breath came slow and ragged, those slipping away into the abyss. Their last moments belonged to me, their whispers lost to the wind. Rome, mighty and proud, thought itself untouchable. I watched as the Republic collapsed into empire, as emperors gorged themselves on power and wine while the poor starved in the streets. The Colosseum, a stage for blood and death, was my playground. As gladiators lay broken in the sand, their bodies stripped of life, I lingered below, in the pits where shadows stretched long. The scent of sweat and despair clung to me as I fed on the silence left in their wake, on the echoes of lives that faded beneath the weight of time. When the legions marched beyond the Rhine, when Rome bled beneath the boots of the barbarians, I followed. I walked among the remnants of Cannae, where Hannibal's forces crushed Roman might like brittle parchment. I watched Carthage burn, the night sky alight with embers that danced like fireflies, before the darkness swallowed them whole. Pestilence was my ally. When sickness crept across Europe unseen yet inescapable, I walked among the afflicted. The monks who prayed over the dying did not know that something else watched with them, something far older than their faith. I crouched beside them, my hollowed eyes staring as their bodies trembled in fevered agony. The scent of mortality thickened the air, and I moved through it like a whisper, drinking in the despair, savoring the silence that followed. The 100 Years' War painted the land with blood, a feast stretched across generations. I drifted through the fields of Agincourt, where English longbows turned French knights into silent figures crumpled in the mud. Joan of Arc burned, her screams swallowed by the crackling flames, and I stood among the crowd, unseen, listening, absorbing. war and plague, the twin children of misery, ensured that I would never go hungry. I knelt beside Vlad the Impaler's forest of corpses, where bodies sagged like ripe fruit on the stakes that lined the roads. The crows gathered, but I was there first. The invaders recoiled at the sight, but I lingered among them, drinking in the stillness that came after the screams had faded. This was no mere cruelty, no act of war. It was an offering to time itself. They burned witches in Salem. The air stank of charred flesh and righteousness, but beneath the ashes, I waited. They accused women of unnatural hungers, of pacts with the unknown. How little they understood. I lingered near the gallows, where condemned men left their last breaths hanging in the cold air. Their bodies twitched when I touched them, but they no longer had voices to scream. I walked battlefields, from the blood-soaked plains of Waterloo to the jungles where men fought and died for land that would forget them. The Napoleonic Wars were relentless, a slow march of conquest and death. The remnants of broken bodies, the whisper of fading souls, I moved among them, unseen, listening, remembering. The guillotine in France did not work alone. I was there when Louis XVI's head fell, when Robespierre whispered his final words before the blade silenced him forever. I stood in the midst of the Haitian Revolution, where the old order crumbled beneath the weight of rebellion. The sugar fields were stained with more than sweat, the echoes of battle still lingering beneath the rustling of the leaves. Time did not slow for me. The Great War was a banquet of silence and sorrow. The dead lay in rows, their fingers still gripping rusted rifles, their unseeing eyes turned toward a sky that no longer cared for them. I moved through the dugouts, where the wounded whispered names that no one would answer. I lingered there, among the forgotten. The world burned again soon after, in places with names that history etched in cold stone. The earth trembled under the boots of soldiers, and I followed in their wake, patient as always. Shadows stretched long over the ruins of cities, their voices swallowed by the wind, their stories left untold. I stood in lands where the sky itself had burned, where echoes of the past clung to walls and ground, unwilling to be forgotten. I moved through the spaces where names became numbers, where voices faded before they could be heard. And now I drift through streets lined with neon, through alleys where the desperate whisper into the night. I walk the highways, my hollow eyes scanning the wreckage of twisted steel and shattered glass. I sit in quiet rooms where the lonely fade into nothing, where the forgotten slip into the dark, unnoticed. The world no longer believes in me. They call their dead statistics. They clean their streets, burn their bodies, seal their tombs in metal and stone. Maggots still writhe beneath the flesh of the departed, still consume what remains, and so do I. For I am the thing in the shadows, I am the whisper at death's door. But I am not the villain of this story. I am merely the one who carries out the foul work you refuse to acknowledge, the shadow that conceals your endless cruelty, your arrogance, and your sins. You turn away, but I remain. I am the Ghoul, and I am eternal.
Pull Me Under, the last stand of Valor's Keep. The wind howled like a wounded beast through the battlements of Valor's Keep, carrying with it the scent of rain and blood. I gripped the hilt of my sword tightly, its pommel slick with sweat. Below, the plain stretched like an ocean of writhing chaos, the enemy advancing in waves, a tide of steel and shadow. The clouds above swirled ominously, as though the heavens themselves recoiled from the carnage to come. For centuries, my family had stood as guardians of this land, bound by duty, by honor. Yet I stood here alone, the last of my line, with nothing left to defend but the crumbling stones beneath my feet and the tattered banner that flapped wildly in the gale. It bore the sigil of a golden phoenix rising from the ashes, a bitter symbol now. Dust coated the once bright insignia, the proud emblem reduced to a relic of a world that had long since forgotten its meaning. The drums began, their rhythm pounding like a heartbeat. I felt the weight of centuries upon me, of those who came before, who stood on these same walls and faced their own doom. The thought should have steeled me, but instead, I was afraid. Afraid of what lay beyond the veil, beyond the spinning wheel of life and death. "Pull me under," I muttered, my voice drowned by the din of the storm. It was not a prayer, not truly. It was an invitation to the abyss, a resigned acceptance of what could not be outrun. A cry rose from the enemy ranks, a sound that clawed at the edges of my mind, feral and unnatural. They surged forward, arrows arcing through the sky like black rain. I ducked behind the parapet, feeling the sharp sting of splinters as one shaft struck the stone near my head. The arrows fell in a relentless hail, embedding themselves in the timbers and earth. One found flesh. The man beside me collapsed silently, his eyes wide in shock as blood pooled beneath him. I reached for his hand, but he was already gone. The assault came in waves. Their battering rams struck the gates with a sickening rhythm, and the wood groaned under the strain. My men, those who still stood, fought valiantly, their blades flashing like lightning in the storm's dark heart. Yet we were few, and they were legion. For every enemy that fell, 3 more took their place, faceless beneath their iron masks. I fought on, each swing of my sword an act of defiance. I lost myself in the rhythm of the battle, a spinning vortex of chaos and blood. Time became meaningless. Seconds stretched into hours, hours into lifetimes. The only constant was the weight of my blade and the roar of my own breath. And then, silence. The enemy had withdrawn, leaving their dead piled at the gates. My legs trembled, and I leaned against the wall for support, staring out at the carnage. The field was a sea of bodies, their forms half hidden by the shifting mists. Yet the respite brought no relief. This was but a prelude. I knew they would return, stronger and more determined. A voice cut through the stillness, low and melodic. "You fight well, but what do you fight for?" I turned sharply, my sword raised. The figure before me was shrouded in a cloak as dark as the storm clouds above, their face hidden beneath a hood. Their presence was unnerving, like a shadow given form. "I fight for honor," I spat, though the words felt hollow even as I spoke them. "For my people, for what remains." The figure chuckled, a sound devoid of warmth. "Honor is a brittle shield. It will not save you." "Who are you?" I demanded, though a part of me feared the answer. "I am the end," they replied simply. "The arrow that finds its mark. The dust that settles after the storm. You called to me, did you not? Pull me under, you said." The realization struck me like a blade. This was no mortal before me. This was death itself, come to collect its due. "I will not yield," I said, though my voice wavered. Death tilted its head as if amused. "None ever do, but the wheel spins, and all must fall beneath its turning." The gates shuddered behind me, the enemy's assault renewed. I turned instinctively, ready to face them once more, but the figure's voice stopped me. "This battle is lost," they said. "You know this. Yet you stand even now, clinging to the frayed threads of a world that no longer remembers you. Why?" The question pierced me deeper than any blade. I looked out over the walls, at the blood-soaked ground, at the faces of those who had fallen. My brothers, my friends. The weight of their sacrifice crushed me, and yet I stood. Why? For them, I whispered, because they stood for me. Death said nothing, but I felt their gaze, heavy and unyielding. The gates gave way with a thunderous crash, and the enemy poured through like a tide. I raised my sword, knowing it was futile, knowing I would fall. And yet I charged, meeting them head-on, a single flicker of light against the darkness. The clash was deafening. Blades met shields, and bodies collided in a frenzied dance. I lost count of how many I struck down, how many wounds I sustained. Blood ran in rivers pooling at my feet. I was drowning in it, the air thick with the metallic tang. And then, the end. It came not with a roar, but with a whisper. A single arrow, loosed from the shadows, found its mark. I stumbled, the world tilting as the spinning wheel ground to a halt. My sword fell from my hand, clattering uselessly to the stones. I sank to my knees, the sounds of battle fading to a distant hum. The storm above seemed to still, the clouds parting just enough to reveal a sliver of light. I reached for it, my fingers brushing the air. "Pull me under," I whispered once more, the words barely audible. And then, nothing. A sudden, abrupt silence. The world moved on.
Livin On A Prayer. Brad tightened his grip on the worn-out wrench, his hands raw from another 12-hour shift at the steel plant. The pay had always been low, but now, with the factory downsizing, it was barely enough to keep the lights on. The guys on the line used to talk about better days, times when hard work meant something, when a man could build a future with his own two hands. But those days were gone. "Brad, boss wants to see you," a co-worker muttered as he walked by. Brad wiped his forehead with the back of his sleeve and exhaled. He already knew what was coming. The manager didn't sugarcoat it. "Look, kid, times are tough. We gotta let you go." He didn't say much after that. There was nothing to say. Susan leaned against the counter at Benny's diner, her feet aching from the double shift she had just pulled. The neon sign outside flickered in and out, much like her hope. The diner used to be packed, a place where families laughed and truckers swapped stories over coffee. Now it was mostly quiet, the clink of dishes echoing in empty space. She ran a hand through her blonde hair and glanced at the clock. Almost midnight. Still no sign of Brad. She worried about him, about them. They had barely made rent last month, and now, with him out of a job, things were only going to get worse. The bell above the door jingled. She turned and saw Brad walk in, his shoulders slumped, his eyes heavy with defeat. "Tell me it's not what I think it is," she whispered, but she already knew. Brad swallowed hard. "They let me go." Susan's hands tightened into fists. Damn it. She wanted to scream, to curse the world for being so unfair, but all she could do was reach for his hand. "We'll figure it out," she said, trying to sound confident, though the lump in her throat betrayed her. Brad forced a smile. "We always do." They sat on the fire escape that night, looking out at the city's dim lights. The air was thick with the scent of rain on pavement. Brad strummed his old guitar, the one he had bought when things were easier. The strings were worn, but the sound was still there. "We're halfway there," Susan said, her voice barely above a whisper. Brad chuckled. "Halfway to what?" She shrugged. "Somewhere better." They had nothing but each other, and sometimes that had to be enough. Days turned into weeks. Brad picked up work wherever he could, odd jobs, fixing cars, unloading trucks. It wasn't much, but it kept them from falling off the edge. Susan picked up extra shifts, even when her body ached so badly she thought she might collapse. One night, Brad came home late, his face streaked with grease, his hands blistered. Susan was already asleep on the couch, a stack of unpaid bills beside her. He sat beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She stirred slightly, murmuring his name in her sleep. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Take my hand, we'll make it, I swear." Brad didn't know how, but he meant it. One morning, after another sleepless night, Susan found a letter on the table. Not a bill, not a final notice. It was from a friend of Brad's, a guy who owned a repair shop on the edge of town. They needed a full-time mechanic. She ran outside, still barefoot. just as Brad was about to leave for another day of odd jobs. "You got a job," she said breathlessly, holding up the letter. He took it from her hands, his eyes scanning the words over and over. Then, slowly, his face lit up with something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Susan took a deep breath, her hands shaking slightly as she reached for his. "Brad, there's something else." He looked up, sensing the weight of her words. "We're gonna have a baby." Brad's breath caught in his throat. He stared at her, then down at her trembling hands. The future was still uncertain, still filled with struggle. But in that moment, standing in the breaking dawn, there was hope. There was always hope.
Black Sabbath. The storm outside raged on, but the thunder never came. Lightning ripped across the sky, illuminating the gnarled silhouette of the old mansion Oswald now called home. He clutched a tattered leather-bound book in his trembling hands. It was a mistake to take it. He knew that now. The strange symbols on its cover seemed to pulse under his fingers, as if alive. Oswald glanced around the dim room. The ancient stone fireplace, dormant for years, suddenly roared to life, casting flickering shadows that danced like mocking specters on the walls. His breath caught in his throat as the air grew heavier, thicker, making it harder to breathe. Then he heard it. A low, guttural hum, rising from somewhere deep in the house. It was a sound that didn't belong, like the resonance of a massive bell struck underwater. Oswald froze. His instincts screamed at him to run, but his legs were rooted to the floor. The sound grew louder, more distinct, until it resolved into the unmistakable rhythm of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, heavy. "Who's there?" Oswald whispered, his voice barely audible over the pounding of his heart. No answer, only the footsteps. They stopped just beyond the doorway, shrouded in darkness. And then it emerged. A shadow, tall and foreboding, its form darker than the void itself. It seemed to absorb the light around it, a moving stain upon reality. Oswald staggered back. "What is this that stands before me?" he gasped, his voice cracking. The figure said nothing. Its presence spoke volumes, an oppressive force pressing down on Oswald's soul. The air seemed to vibrate with malice. Then, in a voice that was not a voice, more like the sound of the wind tearing through a desolate canyon, it spoke. "You summoned me." Oswald shook his head violently. No, I didn't. Liar," the shadow hissed, cutting him off. It raised an arm, long and spindly, pointing directly at him. Oswald's knees buckled under the weight of the gesture, and he fell to the floor. The room shifted. The shadows on the walls twisted into monstrous faces, their mouths opening and closing in silent screams. Flames erupted from the fireplace, their light illuminating words scrawled on the walls in a language Oswald couldn't understand. "You read the words," the shadow continued. "You opened the door. Now you will see." The room dissolved into a vortex of light and fire. Oswald screamed as visions assaulted him, twisting landscapes of molten rock, skies filled with swirling ash, and rivers of blood that carved paths through endless darkness. The figure in black stood beside him, silent, watching. "This is your future," it whispered. "This is what you chose." Oswald tried to deny it, but the memories came flooding back. The night he had stolen the book, the curiosity that drove him to decipher its strange, forbidden text. The words he had spoken aloud, thinking them meaningless. "Please, no, I didn't mean to," he cried. but the figure only laughed. The sound was deafening, like the groaning of the earth splitting apart. You begged for power. You begged for answers. Now you will pay. The ground beneath Oswald cracked, glowing with an otherworldly red light. He clawed at the floor, trying to escape the widening chasm, but there was nowhere to go. The figure loomed over him, its outstretched hand reaching closer. "Oh, no, please, God, help me!" Oswald screamed, tears streaming down his face. He felt the heat of the abyss rising, pulling him down, and then silence. The figure paused, its head tilted slightly as if considering something. "God?" it repeated, mocking. "You called for me. Your God will not answer." With a single motion, it plunged its hand into Oswald's chest. He felt a searing pain as his vision faded, the flames and shadows consuming him. When the villagers found the old mansion the next day, they discovered nothing but ashes where the house had stood. Among the ruins was a single, untouched object, a tattered leather-bound book, its pages blank. But as one curious soul reached out to pick it up, faint words began to appear, glowing red. "You summoned me."
Jumpin Jack Flash. The thunder cracked violently across the evening sky, splitting the clouds like a wound, bleeding rain over the forgotten town of Ashfield. Jack Calloway walked through the muddy back roads, his black boots sinking into the muck, but he didn't slow down. The storm didn't bother him. It never had. After all, when you've been through hell, what's a little rain? Jack had always been a drifter. His life was a patchwork of scars and secrets, woven together by places he'd rather forget. He'd been born in a decrepit shack on the outskirts of town, where the windows rattled in the wind and the walls leaked more than they sheltered. His mother used to hum sad songs while peeling potatoes, and his father, a shadowy figure reeking of tobacco and bitterness, barely acknowledged him. Life was survival, and survival meant leaving. He left when he was 16, hitched rides on freight trains, worked odd jobs, and slept in barns, alleys, and abandoned cars. Along the way, he learned that life could break a man and rebuild him, but only if that man was stubborn enough to keep moving. And Jack was stubborn. Some called him reckless, others called him lucky, but Jack knew the truth. He was reborn the moment he left Ashfield. His old life had been buried there, but the storm tonight seemed to be calling it back to life. The road led him past the ruins of the old mill, its skeletal frame silhouetted against the stormy sky. It had been abandoned for years, but the memories it held were still alive. Memories of the days when Jack and the other local boys dared each other to climb its crumbling towers. They'd laugh, spit on the ground below, and pretend they weren't terrified. Back then, Jack wasn't brave. He was just trying to survive the way he always had, by faking it. As he approached the bridge over the swollen river, lightning lit up the world around him, casting shadows on the trees that looked like clawed hands reaching for his soul. His coat flapped wildly in the wind, but he kept moving. The bridge groaned under his weight, and for a brief moment, he wondered if it would collapse, dragging him down into the churning water below. But it didn't. Jack smiled grimly. Of course it didn't. He was Jumpin Jack Flash, after all, and nothing could bring him down. He didn't know when he'd earned the nickname, but it had stuck. Maybe it was because he always seemed to escape danger just in time, leaping from disaster to safety like a cat with 9 lives. Or maybe it was because of that night in Memphis, when he'd outrun the cops after a bar fight, laughing like a madman as he vaulted over fences and dived through alleyways. The world had tried to crush him, but he'd always found a way to land on his feet. But tonight was different. Tonight, the town was pulling him back, whispering secrets through the wind and the rain, He passed the church, where he'd once hidden from a storm just like this one, praying to a god he didn't believe in. The steeple was crooked now, its paint peeling like the town's forgotten dreams. Jack lit a cigarette under the shelter of a boarded-up storefront and exhaled, watching the smoke disappear into the night. He thought about all the places he'd been: New York, Chicago, Detroit. He'd been a dishwasher, a mechanic, a boxer, and a singer in a blues band that never made it past dive bars. But through it all, he'd never come back, not until tonight. He wasn't sure why he'd returned. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was the pull of unfinished business. Either way, he knew he wouldn't stay long. The past was a weight he refused to carry. As he flicked the cigarette into a puddle, a familiar voice called his name. He turned, and there she was. Emily, the girl who used to sit with him on the school steps, sharing stolen apples and dreams of running away. Her hair was wet, clinging to her face, but her eyes still had that fire he remembered. "Didn't think I'd see you again," she said, her voice soft but steady. Jack smiled, a real smile this time. "Neither did I." For a moment, they just stood there, the rain washing away the years between them. Then, without a word, they walked together down the empty street, their footsteps echoing like the beat of a distant drum. Jack didn't know where the road would lead him next, but it didn't matter. He was still Jumpin Jack Flash, and the world couldn't stop him. The storm was just another reminder of what he already knew. He'd been through fire, flood, and famine, and he'd survived it all. But as he leaped over a gaping hole in the cracked pavement, barely avoiding a speeding car that skidded through the rain-soaked street, he realized there was one thing he might not outrun: Emily. He had escaped everything life had thrown at him. But love, that was the one thing he had never been able to shake. And as she clutched his hand, breathless from the near miss, he knew that this time, maybe he wouldn't try.
Toxicity, between the sacred silence and the chaos. The city pulsed like a living beast, alive with the roar of engines, the flashing of neon lights, and the restless shuffle of its inhabitants. It was an ecosystem of chaos, where the air itself felt heavy with tension. Somewhere between the towering skyscrapers and shadowy alleys, Malik trudged through the streets. He carried a worn messenger bag on one shoulder, a physical burden that seemed to mirror the weight in his chest. Malik wasn't special, at least not in the way the world measured value. He had no wealth, no clout, no titles. He worked for a faceless corporation, sorting through meaningless data while his soul atrophied. Each day, he felt the grind of a system that demanded everything but gave nothing in return. The glossy billboards screamed promises of happiness, luxury watches, sleek cars, designer clothes. But to Malik, they were reminders of what he could never afford. The system thrived on the illusion of control, Malik thought. You were free to chase your desires, but only within the carefully constructed boundaries of the machine. And if you ever got too close to the edges, the system would pull you back, tighter than before. He crossed a bustling intersection, nearly getting clipped by an autonomous delivery vehicle that didn't bother to slow down. What do you own the world? How do you own disorder? Malik muttered under his breath, an echo of something he'd read once. The irony wasn't lost on him. The corporations claimed to bring order to the chaos, but in reality, they were the ones feeding it, building it piece by piece. That night, Malik lay on his threadbare mattress in his dimly lit apartment. The room was cluttered with things he didn't even care about: cheap gadgets, outdated tech, and promotional swag he'd picked up over the years. The walls were thin, and he could hear the muffled arguments of his neighbors, the buzz of a faulty fluorescent light in the hallway. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, a constant reminder of the instability outside. Malik stared at the cracked ceiling, unable to sleep. He felt trapped, Not just in his apartment, but in his own mind. His thoughts were a jumble of frustration and yearning, a chaotic whirlwind of questions. Why was the world like this? Why did people chase things that didn't matter while ignoring what truly did? Somewhere, between the sacred silence and sleep, Malik felt the stirrings of clarity. In the quiet moments, he glimpsed something beyond the noise of daily life, a truth, elusive yet profound. He thought of a line he'd once read, "When I became the sun, I shone life into the man's hearts." What did it mean to become the sun? To awaken others? Malik didn't know, but the idea stayed with him. The next day, Malik found himself wandering aimlessly through the city after work. His feet carried him to the industrial district, where the buildings were grimy, the air thick with smoke and fumes. Factories churned out products endlessly. Plastic goods, disposable tech, things meant to break so people would keep buying more. As he walked, he spotted a group of workers huddled in an alley. They were arguing with a foreman, their voices sharp and angry. Malik slowed his pace, listening from the shadows. The workers were demanding fair pay, better hours, humane treatment. The foreman, red-faced and sneering, dismissed them with a wave of his hand. "This is how it is. You don't like it? There's the door." The foreman's words ignited something in Malik, a spark that had been smoldering for years. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension. "How much longer will you let them feed on your lives?" The workers turned to him, surprised. Malik felt their eyes on him, but he didn't stop. "Every hour you give them is another hour they use to build this machine. They profit from your misery. And for what? More stuff no one needs." One of the workers, a woman with grease-streaked hands and tired eyes, spoke up. "What choice do we have? We've got families to feed." Malik nodded. "I know. They've made it so you think there's no other way. But that's the lie. They want you to believe you're powerless so they can stay in control." The foreman glared at Malik, his voice venomous. "Who are you to come here and stir up trouble?" Malik met his gaze. "I'm no one. Just a man who's tired of seeing the world rot from the inside out." The foreman scoffed and walked away. But Malik stayed with the workers, talking late into the night. He shared his frustrations, his questions, and they shared theirs. For the first time, Malik felt a sense of connection, a break in the isolation that had suffocated him for so long. In the weeks that followed, Malik became a fixture in the industrial district. He listened to the workers, learning their stories and their struggles. He began organizing small gatherings, places where people could speak freely, without fear of judgment or reprisal. Together they talked about what they wanted, a world where people mattered more than profits, where lives weren't reduced to numbers on a spreadsheet. The gatherings grew, spilling into the streets. Malik's voice carried through the city, and others began to listen. Some scoffed, dismissing him as a dreamer. But others felt the stirrings of something they hadn't known in years: hope. One night, as Malik stood before a crowd, he felt the weight of their expectations. He wasn't a leader or a prophet. He was just a man, struggling like everyone else. But in their eyes, he saw the power of collective strength, the potential to reshape the world. He took a deep breath. Somewhere between the sacred silence and the chaos, there's a moment of truth. A moment where we decide what kind of world we want to live in. They've controlled us for too long, feeding us lies, making us think we're small. But together, we're unstoppable. The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices a wave of defiance that echoed through the city. As the movement grew, so did the resistance. The corporations and governments saw Malik as a threat, branding him an agitator, a disruptor. But he didn't stop. He knew the stakes were too high. The world couldn't continue on its toxic path, driven by greed and materialism. Change was possible, but only if people were willing to fight for it. And so, Malik kept going, shining light into the darkness, igniting hearts with the hope of something better. Somewhere, between the sacred silence and sleep, the world began to wake up. In a world drowning in chaos, even a single voice can spark a revolution.
cross the divide. In the heart of the night, where the silence of the forest wrapped around the trees like a suffocating shroud, the woman in the red dress emerged. Her heels crunched softly against the dirt path, the echoes swallowed whole by the encroaching darkness. The air was dense with the scent of pine and damp moss, but underneath it lingered something faintly metallic, as if the earth itself bled from an ancient wound. She moved with purpose, her breath steady, though the weight of the night pressed heavily on her chest. Ahead, the moonlight barely seeped through the web of branches, casting fragmented patterns on the ground. Her crimson dress clung to her body, the fabric whispering secrets of forgotten eras with each step. Her name was Evelyn, though she had long since stopped thinking of herself in human terms. Tonight, she was something more, an emissary from the living to the realm beyond. The song of the forest pulsed faintly in her ears, a rhythmic hum that guided her deeper into the unknown. She clutched a small silver pendant around her neck, its warmth pulsing against her skin like a heartbeat. It had all begun with a letter left on her doorstep 2 weeks prior. Written in a hand she recognized but couldn't name, the note read, "Cross the divide. Find what was stolen." Nothing else. No sender, no instructions, just an address scrawled at the bottom. The edge of the Blackwell Forest, notorious for its ghost stories and vanishing travelers. Evelyn hadn't hesitated. She knew in her bones that the message was for her. She had spent her life feeling like she was straddling two worlds, one foot firmly planted in the mundane, the other brushing against something vast, eerie, and eternal. Dreams of forgotten landscapes, cryptic whispers, and visions of hands reaching from the void had plagued her for years. She had tried to ignore them, but the pull had grown stronger, especially after her sister vanished a year ago. Tonight, she would end the torment. The path led her to the ruins of an old chapel, its skeletal frame barely holding itself together. Vines choked the crumbling stone walls, and broken stained glass littered the ground like forgotten shards of memory. Above, the moon cast its pale gaze through the missing roof, illuminating the altar at the center. Evelyn's breath hitched. There, draped across the altar, was her sister's locket, the one she had worn the day she disappeared. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she picked it up, the cold metal biting into her palm. Her reflection stared back at her from its polished surface, but something was wrong. Her face was distorted, her eyes darker, as if a shadow had taken root inside her. "You came," a voice whispered, slicing through the silence. Evelyn spun around, her pulse thundering. The figure stood in the shadows just beyond the altar, their forms shifting like smoke caught in a breeze. It was neither man nor woman, but something between, as if it had borrowed pieces of humanity and rearranged them in unsettling ways. Its eyes glowed faintly, a sickly amber hue, like the last flicker of a dying flame. "Who are you?" Evelyn demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. The figure stepped closer, its movements languid, almost serpentine. "I am the guardian of what lies beyond the divide." Its voice was layered, as if multiple souls spoke in unison. "You seek what was taken, but the price of crossing is steep." Evelyn tightened her grip on the pendant. "I'll pay it, whatever it is." The figure tilted its head, as if considering her offer. "Bold. But do you understand what you're offering? To cross the divide is to surrender part of yourself. The realm beyond does not return what it takes." She hesitated, the weight of the warning pressing down on her. But then she thought of her sister, of her laugh, her warmth, her absence carving a hollow space inside Evelyn's soul. "I understand. Then follow." The figure extended a hand, its fingers impossibly long and jointed in ways that defied logic. Evelyn took it, suppressing a shudder as the cold seeped into her skin. The world around her shifted violently, as if reality itself were folding in on itself. The trees blurred, the air vibrated, and the ground beneath her feet dissolved into a void. When the chaos settled, they stood on the edge of an obsidian lake, its surface unnaturally still. The sky above was neither day nor night, but a perpetual twilight that pulsed with an otherworldly glow. Shapes moved beneath the water, serpentine and vast, their silhouettes teasing the edge of her vision. "There," the figure said, pointing to the center of the lake. "She waits." Evelyn didn't hesitate. She waded into the water, the cold biting through her dress, numbing her legs. The lake resisted her, as if alive and unwilling to let her pass. But she pushed forward, her breath ragged, her heart a drumbeat of defiance. Halfway across, the water began to pull at her, tendrils of shadow wrapping around her ankles. Panic clawed at her throat, but she forced herself to keep moving. The pendant around her neck grew hot, burning against her chest, and she grasped it tightly, its warmth anchoring her. Finally, she saw her, a pale figure floating just beneath the surface, her hair fanned out like ink spilling into water. Evelyn reached down, her fingers brushing against her sister's cold skin. The moment their hands touched, a shockwave rippled through the lake, and the shadows recoiled, hissing as they retreated. Gasping, Evelyn pulled her sister to the surface. Her eyes fluttered open, glassy and distant, but alive. Tears blurred Evelyn's vision as she embraced her, the warmth of her sister's breath against her neck, grounding her in the moment. "It's over," she whispered, though she knew the cost had only just begun. The figure watched from the shore, its expression unreadable. As Evelyn carried her sister back, the pendant cracked, its light fading into embers before disintegrating. She felt the loss immediately. A part of her had been left behind in the lake, a piece she would never recover. But as the dawn broke through the trees, casting golden light on their path home, Evelyn knew she had made the right choice. Some sacrifices were worth the price. The golden beams stretched across the forest floor like threads weaving the past into the present, guiding her steps as if nature itself recognized her victory. Her sister stirred slightly in her arms, a faint murmur escaping her lips, a sound Evelyn had missed more than anything. The birds began their morning song, tentative at first, as though testing the air, then building into a symphony that welcomed the return of life.
Walk. Phil stood at the edge of the dive bar's pool table, his black jeans dusted with cigarette ash, his boots planted like anchors. The overhead light flickered, casting an eerie glow on his shaved head, sweat glistening from the heat of the crowded room. The stale beer and cheap cologne in the air made his stomach turn. Not because of the scent, he was used to filth, but because of the people surrounding him, fake friends, every single one of them. He had known for a while, the whispers when he wasn't around, the forced laughs that turned into snickers the moment he walked away. The empty words they threw at him, pretending they had his back. It had been brewing inside him like a poison, and tonight he had finally reached his boiling point. "You think I don't know?" His voice cut through the bar like a razor-sharp edge. The group around him, Rick, Sammy, Doug, and the rest of the pack, froze. They exchanged glances, pretending to be clueless, feigning innocence. Rick, the self-proclaimed leader, had his arms crossed, leaning against the jukebox, trying to play it cool. "What are you talking about, man?" Rick scoffed, taking a swig of his beer. "We're just hanging out." Phil chuckled, but there was no humor in it. He took a step forward, towering over Doug, the weakest of the bunch, who instantly shrank under Phil's glare. "Oh yeah, just hanging out? That's what you call talking trash behind my back?" Sammy, always the peacemaker, raised his hands.
"Come on, Phil. You're being dramatic. Nobody's talking trash."
Phil grabbed a pool cue and broke it in half with ease, the loud crack making half the bar turn their heads. He tossed the broken pieces aside. "I've heard it all, every single word. You think I don't notice when you treat me like an afterthought? Like some disposable piece of trash?" He jabbed a finger at Rick. "You, laughing at me the second I walk out the door, calling me a joke. And the rest of you," his eyes swept over the group, "standing there, letting it happen, nodding along, acting like you're my friends." Doug stammered. "It's not like that, man," Phil sneered. "Oh, it's exactly like that." He paced, fists clenched, muscles tensing in his forearms. "Loyalty means something to me. Respect means something. But you," he shook his head, "you don't know what respect is." Rick sighed, rolling his eyes. "Phil, you're losing it. We're just busting balls. You're taking everything too seriously." Phil laughed again, dark and bitter. "Oh, I'm taking it too seriously." He leaned in close, nose to nose with Rick. "I worked my tail off for you. I've stood up for you, defended you, had your back every single time, and all I get in return is disrespect?" Rick scoffed but didn't answer. Phil exhaled sharply. "That's what I thought." The silence stretched between them, thick as smoke. He could feel the weight of the entire bar watching, waiting for what would happen next. But he didn't care. He was done. Done with all of them. "You don't deserve to be in my circle." His voice was low but seething with fury. "You don't deserve my trust, my friendship." He took a step back, shaking his head. "I don't need people like you dragging me down. So, do me a favor." He pointed to the door. "Walk." Rick smirked, shaking his head. "You're serious?" Phil didn't even blink. "Get out of my sight." Sammy looked between them, hesitating, like he wanted to salvage whatever was left. "Phil!" Phil's glare shut him up. "You too, Sammy. You're just as bad. All of you." For a moment, no one moved. Then Doug was the first to step back, hands raised like he wanted no part of this. He mumbled something under his breath before making his way toward the door. Sammy followed, slower, hesitant, but Phil could see it in his eyes. He knew he had been caught. He had no defense. Rick lingered the longest as if trying to prove something, trying to stand his ground. But even he knew he wasn't winning this one. He scoffed, muttered, "Whatever, man," and turned on his heel. One by one, they left. Phil stood there, breathing heavy, his muscles tense. The silence they left in their wake was the most satisfying thing he had ever heard. The bartender, an older guy with a weathered face, walked over and slid a fresh beer toward him. "On the house," he said, nodding with approval. "Not every day a man cuts the dead weight." Phil took the beer, took a slow sip, then set it down with a smirk. Damn right. He felt lighter, free. They went to hell, and that was exactly where they belonged.
Rösta mig gärna. Look mig up. Nämber right up. Yeah, when röst we. Nesroi net. Stegeroi. Yes, burks and nerois listen the clever ashet. Still on goes to the very girl. Well, I've advised you right now what they're in me. You know, it's